The snow-covered expanse of the Ural Mountains stretched beneath a heavy overcast sky, blanketed in an oppressive silence. Among the endless white, the remnants of a forgotten mystery lay buried. It was the Dyatlov Pass incident, an event that had fascinated the world with its unsolved nature. Dr. Ethan Hayes, a university professor with an obsession for unresolved cases, stared at the records spread across his desk. The documents seemed to whisper secrets, yet none could fully explain the inexplicable deaths of 9 hikers in 1959. Their faces, frozen in the stillness of death, haunted him. What had truly happened that fateful night? Was it an accident, an avalanche, or something darker? As Dr. Hayes sifted through the pages, the answers remained elusive. The more he uncovered, the deeper the mystery seemed to grow. It felt as though someone, some force, was deliberately hiding the truth. Yet a pull deep within him refused to let him stop. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more beneath the surface, waiting to be revealed. What if the answer lay not in the official story, but in the fragments hidden in plain sight? The more he investigated, the further he sank into the labyrinth of lies. But he couldn't stop now. The mystery was too big. Dr. Hayes' mind raced as he sorted through the collection of files in front of him. Another report surfaced, buried deep beneath piles of documents. It was cryptic, brief and vague, but it hinted at something more ominous. A Soviet military operation? Or was it something darker? The more he studied it, the more it became clear. The hikers had unknowingly stumbled into something they couldn't understand. But how could they have known? As Dr. Hayes pondered this, a creeping dread settled in. The details were just out of reach, and every clue led to another dead end. Was this a deliberate cover-up? The sense of unease grew with each unanswered question, but he couldn't stop. The mystery was consuming him. There was too much at stake now. He had to continue. Somewhere, buried beneath the years of silence, the truth waited to be discovered. The question was, would it be worth the cost? The discovery of the photograph had unsettled Dr. Hayes. Among the chaos of files and reports, he had found something startling. A grainy black and white image of the hikers standing near their tent, frozen in time. But there was something else, something in the background. A shadow. Dr. Hayes stared at it for minutes, his breath shallow. The shadow was out of place, far too large and distorted to belong to any of the hikers. He couldn't make out what it was, but it felt wrong. Why had this detail never been brought up before? Why was this shadow left out of the investigation? The more he examined the image, the more he realized it was no accident. Something, or someone, had been lurking in the background that night. He felt a chill run down his spine. He was no longer just uncovering old facts. He was getting too close. The danger of uncovering the truth was real. But the pull of the mystery kept him moving forward. As the hours passed, Dr. Hayes found himself sinking deeper into the investigation. His obsession with the mystery had reached a new level. Days blurred together and his sleep-deprived mind struggled to keep up. But the more he uncovered, the more he realized how much was still hidden. Theories about the incident came and went, military tests, natural disasters, and even supernatural forces, but none seemed to explain everything. The pieces didn't quite fit. The deeper Dr. Hayes delved into the investigation, the more conflicted he became. His work was pushing him into dangerous territory, but he couldn't turn back now. He had come too far. Just as he started to feel overwhelmed, a knock at the door broke his focus. The reluctant ally, a close colleague and friend, entered the room, concern etched on their face. "Ethan," they said, their voice steady but filled with worry. "We need to talk. You're pushing yourself too hard." The toll of the investigation was becoming evident in Dr. Hayes' personal life. Days spent combing through old files and photographs had left him physically drained. The obsession with the mystery was starting to affect his relationships with others. He sat at his desk, rubbing his eyes when he received a phone call that would change everything. It was from a source he didn't expect, a former government official with knowledge of classified operations. Their voice was calm but full of urgency. "Dr. Hayes," the voice said, You're digging too deep. There are forces that don't want this truth uncovered. Be careful." The phone clicked, and the line went dead. Dr. Hayes' hand trembled as he set the receiver down. His mind raced. Who was this? And why had they warned him? Something far more dangerous was at play here than he had realized. Dr. Ethan Hayes leaned over his desk, studying a new batch of files he had just received from an anonymous source. Each page seemed to unravel a new layer of the mystery, but also a deeper web of deceit. The hikers, it seemed, had been part of something much bigger than a simple trek across the Ural Mountains. His heart raced as he scanned through the pages, encountering references to military experiments, cryptic government operations, and the odd mention of unsanctioned testing. The incident was no longer just a case of unfortunate circumstances. It was a cover-up, something more intentional. Dr. Hayes felt his resolve solidify. This was no accident. Someone had orchestrated their deaths, but the why remained unclear. What did the Soviet Union fear so much that they would go to such lengths to conceal the truth? He couldn't shake the image of the shadow in the photograph, and the question that had been haunting him, was it a person or something else entirely? As more questions arose, Dr. Hayes began to suspect that this was bigger than a government conspiracy. It could involve something far darker, a force beyond human control. Every answer led him down an even darker path, but he couldn't stop now. He had come too far to turn back. The next day, Dr. Hayes met with Claire Donovan, a former military intelligence officer, who had reluctantly agreed to share what she knew. Claire was cautious but had come to regret her past connections to the Soviet operations. As they sat across from each other in a dimly lit cafe, the tension between them was palpable. "What you're looking into, it's dangerous," Claire whispered, her voice low, as though someone might be listening. "I was involved in a program. Well, I was supposed to stay quiet about it. But after seeing what happened to those hikers, I can't stay silent anymore." Her hands trembled as she placed a manila folder on the table. The documents inside, hastily scribbled and with several blacked-out portions, contained references to a covert operation that might have involved radiation testing, something unknown to the public at the time. "They were testing something out there," Claire continued, "but it was never supposed to involve civilians. Those hikers were just in the wrong place at the wrong time." Dr. Hayes' mind raced. If this was true, the scale of the cover-up was much bigger than anything he had anticipated. He needed more information, but Claire's warning weighed heavily on him. Getting too close could be deadly. Back in his study, Dr. Hayes reviewed the new documents Claire had given him. His mind swirled with the possibility that the Dyatlov Pass incident was part of something much larger. An experiment or test gone wrong, perhaps something that involved more than just government secrecy. As he pieced together the information, he found references to Project Borealis, a secret Soviet program that had been rumored to test radiation levels in remote areas of the country. Could this be the cause of the hikers' injuries, radiation exposure? Or was it something else that had been kept under wraps? He felt a rising sense of urgency. The more he read, the clearer it became that he was treading on dangerous ground. The deeper he dug, the more his investigation began to attract attention, and the more people warned him to stop. But Dr. Hayes couldn't. He was too close. Every theory he had previously dismissed now seemed possible, and he realized that the truth was hiding in plain sight. Yet, there was a deeper question he couldn't ignore. What was the real reason the Soviet Union had conducted such secretive tests, and what happened that night to make the hikers flee into the freezing wilderness? The following week, Dr. Hayes visited the Dyatlov Pass area in person. Armed with a camera, his notebooks, and his ever-growing list of questions, he trekked through the snow-covered terrain where the hikers had met their untimely end. The air was biting, and the wind howled through the trees, sending clouds of snow drifting across the landscape. As he stood at the foot of the mountain, staring at the wreckage of the hikers' abandoned tent, a sense of dread washed over him. He had been prepared for the cold, for the desolation, but nothing had prepared him for the overwhelming silence. It was as if the land itself held its breath, hiding its secrets from those who dared to investigate. Dr. Hayes took pictures of the site, capturing the stillness and the eerie emptiness. In the distance, the remains of a campfire could be seen, long extinguished. But as he studied the area, he realized that there was something wrong. The location where the tent had been found didn't match the survivors' testimony. Something didn't add up. Could it be that the hikers had been moved? Or was there another explanation for their strange behavior? The more he investigated, the more it felt as though the land itself had a dark secret to protect. As Dr. Hayes continued to piece together the puzzle, he began to realize that someone else was monitoring his every move. Anonymous phone calls, shadowy figures seen from the corner of his eye. It was clear that his investigation was no longer just a personal quest for answers. It was becoming a battle, one that would cost him more than he had ever anticipated. Late one evening, as he sat in his office, reviewing photographs from the Dyatlov Pass site, the phone rang. A familiar voice was on the other end. "You're getting too close, Dr. Hayes," the voice warned, its tone cold and calculated. "Stop now, and we'll leave you alone. Keep going, and you'll never know peace again." The line went dead. Dr. Hayes stared at the receiver for a moment, his heart pounding. The warning was clear, but in that moment, his resolve hardened. He couldn't stop now. Not when the truth was so close. With the words of the mysterious caller still echoing in his mind, Dr. Hayes prepared for what was to come. The deeper he went, the more he understood. The truth had a price, and he was willing to pay it. Dr. Hayes' obsession with the Dyatlov Pass incident had now crossed a threshold. Days blended into nights as he relentlessly reviewed military records, autopsy reports, and any lead that could point him closer to the truth. But despite his progress, the puzzle remained incomplete. He had been given pieces, but they were scattered and disconnected. The key, he thought, had to lie in the mysterious Project Borealis mentioned in the Soviet reports. His hands trembled as he sifted through a new set of documents that revealed disturbing details of radiation experiments in remote regions of the Soviet Union. Could radiation have been the cause of the hikers' injuries? The thought sent chills through him. He wasn't ready to entertain such a notion, yet the signs were there. Dr. Hayes had been warned numerous times to stop, but now more than ever, he was determined to finish what he had started. It was clear that these hikers weren't victims of a random avalanche. They had stumbled into something far more sinister, something that hadn't just killed them, but obliterated their very essence. And he was certain that uncovering the truth would come at a price he wasn't sure he was ready to pay. The next morning, Dr. Hayes met with Claire Donovan once again, this time at her apartment. She was hesitant, but Dr. Hayes knew he needed more from her. As they sat across from each other, Claire's hands shook slightly as she pushed a folder across the table. "What you're digging into? It's dangerous," Claire warned, her voice barely above a whisper. Project Borealis wasn't just about radiation. It was about controlling minds, testing limits that should have been touched. Dr. Hayes' mind raced as he glanced at the contents of the folder. The papers were heavily redacted, but what he could read sent a shiver down his spine. The experiments, Claire explained, had involved not just radiation, but also psychological manipulation, testing human endurance in extreme environments. The hikers, it seemed, were far from innocent bystanders. They had unknowingly walked into a testing ground for something far darker. They were meant to die, Claire muttered under her breath, her face pale. Dr. Hayes stared at the documents, realizing that the scope of the conspiracy was far beyond what he had imagined. And now, he had uncovered a truth that he wasn't sure the world was ready to face. As Dr. Hayes delved deeper into the files Claire had provided, his worst fears began to take shape. The more he read, the clearer it became that the Dyatlov Pass incident was just a small part of a much larger and more horrifying experiment. The Soviet Union had been conducting trials on civilians, pushing the human psyche to its absolute limits. The hikers had unknowingly walked into a carefully orchestrated trap. The documents described extreme weather conditions, induced paranoia, and even the use of drugs and radiation to control their behavior. The injuries to the hikers, internal trauma, broken bones and radiation burns, matched the symptoms described in the reports. Dr. Hayes now understood that these were not the deaths of hikers who had simply lost their way. They had been deliberately exposed to an environment that was designed to break them, to test their mental and physical endurance in the face of overwhelming terror. The cold, the isolation, the strange injuries. It all made sense now, but only in the most terrifying way. The truth was a monster, and Dr. Hayes had just uncovered its ugly face. But there were still too many unanswered questions. What was the ultimate goal of this experiment? And why had the Soviet government gone to such lengths to conceal the truth? The deeper Dr. Hayes ventured into his investigation, the more the world around him seemed to shift. His colleagues at the university began to notice his obsessive behavior, and some even warned him to stop. But the more they urged him to back off, the more certain he became that he was on the verge of a discovery that could change everything. One night, as he sat alone in his study, piecing together the last remaining clues, the door to his apartment creaked open. He didn't hear it at first, but when he looked up, he saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was Claire. But she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a tall, shadowy figure, his face obscured by a dark hood. Claire's expression was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Dr. Hayes, we need to leave. Now," she said, her voice shaking. The figure in the doorway stepped forward, and Dr. Hayes felt a cold chill run down his spine. Before he could react, the figure lunged at him, knocking him to the ground. Claire's scream echoed through the room, but it was too late. The danger was real now. Dr. Hayes had crossed a line, and those who wanted the truth buried were coming for him. The confrontation left Dr. Hayes shaken, but it also solidified his resolve. Claire had disappeared in the chaos, and the figure in the doorway had vanished just as quickly as he had appeared. Dr. Hayes knew that his investigation was no longer just a matter of seeking answers, it was a matter of survival. The shadowy figures, the threats, they were all part of a much larger conspiracy that wanted the truth to remain hidden at any cost. As he wiped the blood from his lip, Dr. Hayes vowed to continue. The only way to stop this nightmare was to expose it, to force the world to acknowledge what had been done. But as he prepared to leave his apartment and continue his journey, a new, ominous thought crossed his mind. If they were willing to kill to keep the truth hidden, what else would they do to protect their secret? The deeper he went, the more dangerous the world became. But Dr. Hayes knew that backing down now was not an option. He was in too deep, and the truth was too important. Dr. Hayes' obsession with the Dyatlov Pass incident had spiraled beyond his control. The events from the past week, the break-in, the mysterious figure, had left him shaken. But his resolve had only grown stronger. His pursuit for answers was no longer just academic. It was personal. He was no longer merely investigating. He was uncovering a network of lies and violence that reached far beyond what he had ever imagined. Every new piece of evidence only confirmed what he feared. The Soviet Union had conducted horrific experiments at the pass, and the hikers had been innocent pawns in a far larger game. As Dr. Hayes sat in his study, his mind raced through the possibilities. Who was behind this? What did they want? And what were they willing to do to keep this secret buried? The more he learned, the more the threat of danger loomed over him. But he couldn't stop. He had to finish this. He owed it to the hikers, to Claire, to everyone who had suffered in silence for too long. The truth was out there, and Dr. Hayes would expose it, no matter the cost. Dr. Hayes' next move took him to a former military site on the outskirts of the Dyatlov Pass area. The location had been abandoned for years, but he had tracked down a former soldier who had witnessed parts of the experiments. The man, now old and frail, was reluctant to speak, but the more Dr. Hayes pushed, the more he uncovered. The soldier recalled strange, unmarked trucks coming into the area years ago, filled with people and equipment for undisclosed tests. His story aligned with the military records Dr. Hayes had already uncovered, confirming that the hikers had unknowingly walked into the middle of these experiments. The soldier revealed that the tests had involved radiation, not just physical endurance, but psychological manipulation. They were testing fear, the man whispered, looking over his shoulder nervously. Fear was the real weapon. Dr. Hayes felt his stomach drop. What kind of government would subject people to this kind of horror? And why had it been hidden for so long? The soldiers' revelations led Dr. Hayes to the conclusion that the hikers had been exposed to more than just radiation. The psychological manipulation, the induced fear, they had been placed in an environment designed to break them. The question that now plagued Dr. Hayes' mind was whether they had died because of the physical trauma or the mental collapse brought on by the tests. The deeper he dug, the more questions arose. What did they hope to achieve by using fear as a weapon? Could it have been part of a larger Cold War strategy? Was this a failed experiment, or was it just one piece of a terrifying larger plan? Dr. Hayes couldn't stop asking these questions. But with every answer, more came to light. As he pored over documents, photographs, and the soldiers' testimony, he knew he was dangerously close to exposing something that could shake the foundation of everything he knew. The cost of uncovering the truth was becoming more apparent. But for Dr. Hayes, there was no turning back. Dr. Hayes' research had reached a critical point. He was on the verge of exposing a government conspiracy that had been carefully hidden for decades. But with every step forward, the danger grew. He could feel the threat closing in, anonymous messages, shadowy figures watching him, and now even the walls seemed to close in on him. In a moment of desperation, Dr. Hayes turned to his trusted ally, Claire Donovan. But when he reached her apartment, he was greeted by an empty, desolate space. Her belongings were gone, and there was no sign of a struggle. The only clue was a cryptic note left on the table. "They're watching us. It's too late." Dr. Hayes' heart sank. The forces behind this conspiracy were real, and they had taken Claire. He knew what he had to do next. He had to rescue her and finish what they had started. But the risks were higher than ever. Claire had been his ally, and now she was missing, possibly in danger. Dr. Hayes' investigation had cost him his safety, his friendships, and now it was threatening the life of someone he cared about. Dr. Hayes' search for Claire took him deep into the underbelly of the city. He followed a trail of cryptic messages, dark alleyways, and unmarked doors, each leading him closer to the heart of the conspiracy. It became clear that those who had orchestrated the Dyatlov Pass experiment would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. Dr. Hayes' every move was being watched, and the threat of death was no longer abstract. But he couldn't stop. The truth about Project Borealis and the experiments had to come to light. As he pushed forward, he was faced with a terrifying choice. Continue to uncover the truth, risking his life and Claire's, or walk away and leave the secrets of the past buried forever. But Dr. Hayes knew there was no turning back. He had come too far to walk away now. With every step, the danger increased, but so did his determination. The truth had a cost, and he was prepared to pay it. Dr. Hayes stood at the threshold of the hidden underground facility, the cold steel door in front of him, a stark contrast to the warmth of the world he had once known. His search for Claire had led him here, deep beneath the city where shadows hid more than just secrets. The silence was deafening as he descended the narrow stairwell, each step echoing through the metallic corridors. The weight of the conspiracy now felt tangible, the truth he had been chasing slipping closer, but wrapped in layers of danger. With each corner turned, the air seemed to grow heavier, more oppressive. He knew the deeper he went, the more he risked losing everything. His life, his sanity, and possibly the only person he cared about, Claire. The thought of her lost and possibly in danger fueled his determination. But as he moved forward, Dr. Hayes realized that he was no longer just an investigator. He was now a participant in a deadly game, and the stakes had never been higher. The deeper Dr. Hayes ventured into the labyrinth of underground corridors, the more he began to feel like a man walking through history's darkened halls, with every step revealing something new. Finally, he arrived at a large metal door, half open, revealing the dimly lit interior. Inside, rows of filing cabinets and monitors lined the walls, a ghostly reminder of the operations that had once taken place here. Dr. Hayes hesitated, feeling the weight of the years that had passed since the facility's use. His hand instinctively reached for his camera, documenting every detail, every scrap of evidence. But he wasn't just collecting data anymore. He He was unraveling a story, one filled with destruction, pain, and manipulation. He knew that what he would uncover in this room would shatter any remaining illusion of innocence. Claire had been right all along. This was no ordinary investigation. And now, Dr. Hayes realized, he was in far deeper than he could have ever anticipated. In the center of the room, Dr. Hayes found a set of large unmarked crates, their contents hidden beneath layers of canvas. His heart raced as he carefully lifted the tarp, revealing rows of outdated equipment and strange devices he couldn't identify. As he examined them, his mind spun with possibilities. These were not tools for normal research. They were instruments for something far more sinister. His hand hovered over a particular device, its markings faint but telling. It was a psychological conditioning tool, one he had read about in military reports. His suspicions grew. This was no simple experiment. The Dyatlov Pass incident was the tip of the iceberg, a small tragedy in a much larger, more horrifying program. The more Dr. Hayes uncovered, the more he realized how much of it was designed to control, to break people. The idea of fear and radiation combined. His mind couldn't fully grasp the scale of the horror that had unfolded here. He needed to find Claire and escape before it was too late. As Dr. Hayes turned to leave, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. His heart skipped a beat as he realized he wasn't alone. The danger he had feared for so long had finally caught up with him. A shadow appeared at the end of the hallway, and a voice called out from the darkness, "You've gone too far, Dr. Hayes." The voice was cold, controlled, one Dr. Hayes recognized from the many cryptic warnings. The Keeper of Secrets. The mastermind behind the cover-up. Dr. Hayes's mind raced. His every instinct screamed at him to run, but he knew he couldn't. Claire's life was in jeopardy, and the truth was just within reach. The figure in the hallway stepped forward, their silhouette barely visible in the low light. "You've uncovered things no one should know," the voice continued. "Now, you'll pay the price." Dr. Hayes stood his ground, his resolve hardening. The confrontation was inevitable. But he wasn't backing down now, not after everything he had learned. In the final confrontation, Dr. Hayes faced the Keeper of Secrets, each of them armed with their knowledge of the past. The Keeper's calm demeanor was unnerving, and their words were laced with contempt. "You think exposing the truth will save you? The world is not ready for what you've uncovered. You should have stopped long ago." But Dr. Hayes stood firm, refusing to back down. The truth was too important, too dangerous to leave buried. "You've been hiding the truth for decades," Dr. Hayes retorted. "Now, it's time for the world to know." The Keeper's expression flickered with a hint of fear, a crack in their otherwise composed facade. But it was too late. Dr. Hayes had already gathered the evidence, and nothing would stop him now. As the confrontation escalated, Dr. Hayes realized that revealing the truth was no longer just about solving a mystery. It was about justice, justice for the hikers, for Claire, and for everyone who had suffered in silence. The Keeper of Secrets had underestimated him, and now they would face the consequences. Dr. Hayes stood at the edge of the deserted building, his heart pounding with both fear and anticipation. The Keeper of Secrets had been exposed, but the danger was far from over. He had the evidence, but the conspiracy wasn't just going to disappear. It was clear now. Revealing the truth would come at a heavy price. As the world began to uncover the truth about Project Borealis, Dr. Hayes felt the weight of the lies lift from his shoulders. But there was no time to celebrate. Claire's life was still at risk, and the forces behind this web of lies were far more powerful than he could have imagined. He had hoped that exposing everything would bring closure, but it only brought more questions. Who would believe him? Who would act? As he prepared to face the next stage of this dark journey, Dr. Hayes understood that the truth was just the beginning of a new battle, one that would change everything. But there was no turning back now. With the truth beginning to spread, Dr. Hayes turned to Claire, who had been found in hiding. Her face was drawn, haunted by the experience, but she was alive. "You were right," Dr. Hayes said quietly, his voice tinged with guilt. "I should have listened to you sooner." Claire, still recovering from the terror she had faced, nodded but didn't say much. The conspiracy was unraveling, but there was still much work to be done. They had to ensure that the evidence reached the right people, that the truth wasn't buried again. "They'll come after us," Claire warned, her voice shaky but resolute. "You're not just exposing a secret, you're exposing a system that will do anything to protect itself." Dr. Hayes knew she was right. Their lives would never be the same, but as long as the truth was out, they had won. For now, it was enough. The following days were filled with chaos. Dr. Hayes worked tirelessly to get the evidence to the press, but the threats were unrelenting. Anonymous calls, strange cars parked outside his home. He could feel the eyes of the conspiracy watching his every move. But nothing could stop him now. As news outlets began to report on the experiments and the horrific events at Dyatlov Pass, Dr. Hayes couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet triumph. The world was finally waking up to the truth, but at what cost? The power behind the conspiracy was far-reaching, and as Claire and Dr. Hayes sifted through more information, it became clear that even the press couldn't be trusted. The fight for the truth had only just begun. But for now, exposing the lies felt like the only victory they could claim. As the weeks passed, Dr. Hayes became increasingly paranoid. The conspiracy hadn't just been about secrecy, it had been about control. Those who had orchestrated the experiments had far more resources than he had anticipated. They were still hunting him, still trying to silence him. He realized that the web he had uncovered wasn't just a government operation. It was a deep, shadowy network with its tendrils in every corner of society. As he prepared to leave his apartment, Dr. Hayes felt a chill run down his spine. A knock at the door. He hesitated but knew he couldn't hide forever. He opened it to find an unexpected visitor. A former colleague who had once been involved in the investigation, now offering a cryptic warning. "They know where you are," the colleague said urgently. "They're coming for you." Dr. Hayes knew the danger was far from over. But the truth would not be suppressed, not while he was still alive. Dr. Hayes and Claire made the difficult decision to leave the city, to vanish into the shadows, but not before releasing the final, irrefutable evidence to the world. They knew that they were risking everything, but the truth had to be out there. As they walked through the crowded streets, Dr. Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. The truth had been revealed. No matter the consequences, they had done the right thing. The government's conspiracy, the manipulation, the fear. It was all out in the open now. There would be no more hiding. The story would live on, and those responsible would eventually be held accountable. The world would know what had happened at Dyatlov Pass, and the price they had paid for the truth would not be in vain. Dr. Hayes reflects on the aftermath of exposing the Dyatlov Pass incident. Despite the world knowing the truth, he feels emptier than before. The hike victims' faces still haunt him, and the truth has left more questions than answers. Claire has moved on, but Dr. Hayes remains consumed by the aftermath. He realizes the truth isn't enough, survival now is. He's threatened but knows he can't stop. The battle for the truth continues, though the cost is personal. Walking through the city, Dr. Hayes feels disconnected. The world is moving on while he's stuck in the past. He realizes exposing the truth hasn't brought peace, only a need for inner healing. The search for closure has become his next journey. Dr. Hayes reflects on his journey and the heavy toll of seeking the truth. The hiker's story is now public, and though he's at peace with his role, he must now let go and move forward, leaving the past behind. With the truth revealed, Dr. Hayes walks away from the city, accepting the unanswered questions and the pain. He's ready to step into a new chapter, free from the weight of the past.